What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pain Sucks podcast. It's been a while since we've done a live interview with some amazing experts through this quarantine, stay-at-home time. We've just been doing a lot of one-on-one and some like little tidbits, but I'm super excited to be back with you today. And I want to introduce a friend of mine who I've known for a while, and actually someone who in the world of toxicity is considered an expert, and people from all over the world reach out to him. And this is Dr. Scott Richmond out of Iowa. And Scott, how are you doing this morning? Good. Thanks for having me. Awesome, man. So listen, this is what we want to do. We just want to have a back and forth for the next 20, 30 minutes. But my intention this morning for our listeners and your listeners and people is to understand the relationship between chronic pain and toxins. And when we talk about toxins, there's just so many levels, and I'm going to let you go through that. However, pain sucks obviously started out of a need for when my back was really bad and my discs sequestered and herniated, and just looking for solutions that were different from surgery. And so I stumbled upon one thing after another. I realized that for chronic pain, the answer does not have to be medicine, and it does not have to be painkillers. But I also discovered in that process that there's a ton of layers to chronic pain. And, in past episodes, we've talked about the mental and the spiritual and the physical and a bunch of aspects. But today we want to dive in with you and learn a lot about cellular healing and also how it plays a role in chronic pain. So everyone, I want you to introduce to Dr. Scott. And Scott, if you would just maybe spend 4 or 5 minutes and give us your story, man. Like, how did you get into the natural healing world? Where are you at right now? And I know you've battled some massive health challenges and come out on the other end, which to me makes anybody an expert. So I'm going to be quiet. You go ahead and take it away. Everyone, this is Dr. Scott.
Awesome. Yeah. So thanks for having me. And, really my journey in all of this began back in undergraduate, which I have an appreciation for chronic pain. I feel like I've, suffered from, debilitating pain and lack of recovery athletically since I was in grade school, and there was no solutions. There was no answers. It was kind of, just battle through it. And I played all kinds of sports, went into college, started playing baseball. It was an injury ultimately that ended that career, but thankfully it did, because I was able to get into athletic training because I was no longer an athlete. I wanted to work with them and started to see the injuries, how to rehabilitate, some, solutions on that front. But what ultimately that did, and why I'm so thankful for that injury, is that it led me to chiropractic school. So like yourself, been a chiropractor since 2005 here in Iowa. And, I was into practice, and about a year and a half in, I found myself very, very sick after my daughter was born. And what we discovered is that I'd been living in a home that was full of toxic mold, and I didn't really know it. But there were all the warning signs. But of course, when you're talking about your largest investment in life, you kind of turn a blind eye. Hey, it's going to be okay. Plus, there was so many factors that I didn't even know. And, fast forward into 2007, which was probably the year that I met you. I remember the first time meeting with you, sitting by a poolside. I think we were in Florida. And I started, hearing this message about toxins. And specifically heavy metals. An individual in our lives was teaching about nutrition and cellular health, and how that married together with what we did as chiropractors and why it was so important. And lo and behold, like I said, I found myself sick. So I was really blessed for the fact that at least I was surrounded by people who understood, and I knew who to go to as far as the experts, because, medically speaking, there were no solutions. And what that really helped me do is step into my practice on a day-to-day basis, working with our patients and realizing that, chiropractic and adjustments and even proper nutrition is amazing. But the reality is I started to discover a much bigger picture that I thought was really important. Like, if we were going to be a true healthcare provider, a true wellness clinic, should we not look at those aspects for them? And so I started digging into, ironically, it started with blood testing that people, were bringing their labs in, and more specifically around the topic of cholesterol. So fat, right? And I'm like, this doesn't add up. you know, the doctors, even my own doctor had told a patient of mine, a mutual patient, that, hey, everything looks good. And I looked at his numbers and I'm like, his triglycerides were super high, but his cholesterol was low to, you know, average of what they would want it to be. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me, and I'm going to dig into this. And so I started, you know, looking at the truths behind just that topic alone. And what I discovered is they're not even running the gold standard testing that would allow that person to truly understand what's happening to them. And I had remembered high triglycerides are linked to one specific toxicity issue, and that's heavy metals and oxidative stress. And that's super important. And this kind of segues into today's topic of, you know, and your podcast of chronic pain is we need cholesterol. We need good fat. Our brain needs it to be able to function and to be able to heal. And that's the premise of how cells, you know, stay healthy is we need to have good fat, good membranes that are not full of toxins and are not inflamed. So we're going to, you know, I want to talk about a different level of inflammation, you know, different from when, you know, I had my knee injury, you had your disc herniation. There's a different level of inflammation that is really a big driver of all of this, but it's not the cause. And that's really what I want to get into today. But that's how I was able to start to go down the path of getting myself well, because it wasn't just the mold that was making me sick. I had already had a lot of issues going, you know, growing up before then, but mold was the final piece. It's never the only, you know, the one thing, but it's what makes everything else worse. And so I discovered, you know, I was full of heavy metals, chronic viral issues. And then I'd even been, you know, told, hey, you have Lyme disease and a couple other co-infections. So it literally was the entire gamut. And that's where it led me in practice to where I'm at today. I coach and work with clients all around the world. I no longer practice chiropractic because after going through what I went through, it was just, I believe, you know, my God-given purpose that it used the understanding the principles of chiropractic and the self-healing properties that our bodies have to then segue into this other topic that, you know, in my opinion, is affecting every single person on the face of the earth. And, you know, to one degree or another. And like myself, you know, I was searching for those solutions because we want to simplify what, you know, this complexity, but the reality is there's a lot. Like I like what you said is like one thing led to another. And that's what my, you know, journey of 12 years has been, is learning one thing after another to where we're at today. It's like we understand some areas that just were never addressed prior and have been profound even in my healing within the last, say, 3 years, but it's been over a decade of a journey. And so I bring that to, you know, working with clients and making sure that we hit every aspect. You know, we talk a lot about the physical chiropractic, taking care of your structure, your posture, but we also get into even I like the fact that you talk about the emotional piece because that's a huge thing, no matter what you're dealing with. Because I like to say that we have to recover twice. And you know, the emotions that, you know, and I saw it personally with you, and also when you go through an illness, you go through injury, you not only have, you know, for me, it was the exposures, but it's also the experience. Like we have to mentally recover from that trauma, you know, the perceived trauma that our brain, and everybody's going to digest that situation differently. But the cool part is that we can literally rewire our brain. But the problem is when it comes to the toxins, our brain is being affected. That's why I say no matter what somebody's dealing with, we ultimately have to heal the brain on an emotional level and on a chemical level. So yeah. Today, the big piece, you know, is the toxicity and how that is playing into, you know, just perpetuating this deeper level of cellular inflammation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like it. So, I mean, it's funny because I feel like everybody that's an expert now in different things is there just simply because of a life story. Yep. And what they've gone through. It's pretty rare nowadays to just meet that one expert who just studied it and learned it, you know. And actually, I think it's kind of dangerous. And I did a post on this earlier about how, like, I think patients nowadays just they gravitate to someone who's been where they are. And that's interesting. So let's dive into this. First of all, I'm gonna put you on the spot. So number one, you know, with all the chronic pain out there, physical, psychosomatic, whatever it is, what percentage of people, in your opinion, need to address this toxicity portion if they're truly going to conquer the pain that they've been dealing with from whatever source?
Like I said before, honestly, in all my years of doing specific toxicity tests, checking heavy metal levels, I've never seen it to be normal. You know, with somebody that's come with whatever condition, I don't care if it's late stage cancer or it's, hey, I have a little bit of low back pain, we can start to dig in and find some of those sources that are only hurting you. So no matter what, and I like to refer to the study, I think it was way back in 2010, of studying cord blood of fetuses. So that, you know, they've never drank the water, they've never ate the food, and they've never even taken a breath in their life, but yet they're finding over 200 plus chemicals inside their blood before they're even born. So that's the reason why I can honestly say it's 100% of people. Now, depending on the situation, the scenario, like myself, I mean, I was super, super toxic. I was living in an environment that doesn't warrant healing, which is one of my first roles as a health consultant, is making sure that people are set up for success. And that, you know, that's a big challenge, especially when I'm working with mold clients, because we're talking about possessions. We're talking about their house. We may be talking about their workplace, their car. I mean, it's a huge emotional and physical stress, but financially, it's a very, very costly journey to go through, you know, what is called mold illness, like myself and many others that I work with. And that's the thing is specifically about mold, over 50% of buildings and structures in the United States are considered, you know, moldy, you know, water damaged buildings. Schools being one of the worst because of budgeting, maintenance issues. And so when, you know, we can start to go down this huge path of going, well, is it really just because that's who they are, or are these things affecting, you know, these toxins affecting their brain, and it's going to affect, you know, especially like in children, their behavior, their attention, or in this case, pain, you know? And so they don't have to have this, you know, actual injury or trauma. And that kind of gets into, well, what is fibromyalgia, right? It's like, I have pain everywhere. No. Right. And this is a big, please take this, you know, an asterisk in your mind, is that you don't have whatever said diagnosis or label.
Correct.
You're toxic.
Yeah.
And, you know, we break that down, you know, down to the cellular level, and then the specific strategies of how you can take care of it. But the reality is we are all toxic. So everybody, you know, listening right now can raise your hand and repeat that, and you're going to be dead on. Now the key is okay, at what levels, and, you know, what types of toxins may be the, you know, the primary things to really go after, because there's different strategies for each of those. But in all, there's a lot of overlap, and some just amazing things throughout all the years that we've been able to learn to really help people get their lives back.
I love it. And you said something about, like, even this, the cord study in these newborns showing these massive amounts of toxins that really they had zero, you know, responsibility in putting into their own body. It was all mom and environment. And yet it from the moment that life starts, that body's already working at less than its fullest potential. And exactly. So I meet with people all the time who have chronic pain, and one of the answers that we always hear is I don't know how this happened, whether it's physical or whatever the cause. I mean, how could this have happened to me? And what would really save the world from a whole lot of problems would be this idea that if we could just get people to understand that the world we live in is broken and sick and toxic, and that from moment one we're battling uphill. Yep. And so that when it shows up in a 40-year-old like myself who did something stupid at the gym and sequesters the disc, and I go, oh, it was that specific movement at the gym. Well, it wasn't. What it was 40 years of cells that were beat up, cells that were toxic, cells that were moldy, cells that had heavy metals in them from vaccination and all these other things, cells that just were you know, virtually living on the edge. so that when I pushed myself to a high level of function and a high level of like, hey, go to that next level, Matt, my body went into shutdown mode. And in my experience of a body that didn't work correctly and hadn't been working correctly was a sequestered disc that then opened the door for me to find all these other things that were going on at a cellular level. So the fact that you say 100% is not people sitting there going, well, it's not me. It is them. It has to be them because they live in this world also, this world that's full of pesticides and chemicals. And so taking that into the body, even when you're not knowing that you are, or you were unaware completely that someone did it for you, sets you up so that now we have a book this big full of diagnoses that probably should be about this big if we really just got through to this one thing that I want you to just spend the next few minutes on, which is this idea of the cell and the idea of what happens when toxins enter our body, what happens to that cell, and then when that cell is, you know, clogged and beat up, then like what are the experiences people are going to manifest?
Yeah. So one of the things you brought up that is super important to breaking down cellular function is you mentioned pesticides. And there is a lot of research out there now, and one of the leading doctors that, you know, I study from and helps to give, you know, product solutions to remove this stuff is showing we've seen not only is it overuse, and I mean, I've got kids, you got kids and super athletic playing, you know, 7 baseball games. Thank goodness we're done for the summer, and we actually were able to have that here in Iowa. Right. But the reality is we live in GMO country. We live in Monsanto country, and it's everywhere, and it's a hotbed. So what has been shown is that these soft tissue injuries, ACLs, shoulders, rotator cuffs, things like that, discs, heavy glyphosate poisoning. Right. Not only is it the gut, which we'll talk about it, and, you know, because a lot of people start, you know, they've heard, hey, I have leaky gut, you need. Well, that's exactly what Roundup, Monsanto, these types of pesticides do to our gut, which we're going to get into with the cell and how that cascades into this inflammatory process. But the reality is it's affecting your soft tissues. So we have to get the glyphosate out. It's not just the mold. It's not just the metals. It's not just, you know, other types of infections, but this pesticide that you're not running from. It's everywhere. Even if you eat organic, they now have started to look at the levels like in organic kale and other vegetables, and it's still above the allowed amount, but yet we still call it organic. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So that's just one example of what's happening to the actual tissues, but further, you know, below that is the actual cell. And we talked about at the very beginning about fats and membranes. So our cells have the dual layer of fat that makes up the membranes. And that's on the outside of the cell. But on the inside, our cells have organs. Well, those organs also have membranes. So we have an outer cellular membrane and we have an inner cellular membrane. Okay, so more specifically, one of the things that we really have to address is mitochondrial functions. So mitochondria are ancient bacteria. And they are what stores up our energy to make that cell run. So it's gasoline in the tank. The problem is that whether it's a pesticide, a heavy metal, or even like a bacterial infection, things like that, our cells have these receptor sites. And it's, you know, chemicals, our bodies are nothing but energy and chemicals. And it has to be able to communicate properly. And but what happens is these toxins will bind to these receptor sites. It causes what I call cellular congestion. Bad things can't get out of the cell. Okay. Just like, you know, hopefully everybody's going to the bathroom every single day. Your cells need to go to the bathroom every single day. Your mitochondria need to produce water to flush out from the inside of the cell out into, so we can excrete it. You know, our mitochondria alone produce about 2 liters of water. So when we talk about, you know, even a simple solution when it comes to chronic pain, hydration. And I'm not talking about, hey, I drank a milk jug full of water today, because most of the time we're drinking dead, acidic water. And that's the issue. So we want to start all the way down inside the cell, making sure that the mitochondria have enough of the nutrients, the water, because ultimately to do this at that level, we need to raise cellular energy before you can properly start to detoxify. Okay, because most people have this high toxic burden, but very low cellular energy. And this is why if you know, somebody out there is listening who's done a quote unquote cleanse, or maybe a deeper type of a detox process, and they just didn't do very well with that, this is the reason, is because you might have done the right thing, but it's the order. Okay, and that's super important. And so when our cells get congested, things like for me specifically was mold. Well, mold causes a chemical called cytokines, and it just, my immune system was already suppressed because of other things, heavy metals probably being the #1 reason why the immune system is suppressed. Then, you know, we're not going to get into parasites today, but parasites lock down our immune system. So that's super important. Even today with COVID and everything else, you want to boost your immune system, get rid of the toxins, get rid of the opportunistic things that are hanging out in your body, because your body knows how to deal with viruses, even if it is a mutated, even if it is not a natural wild virus. Amazing thing is our bodies are meant to adapt. And that's the whole key. We're not going to get away from the GMOs and the Wi-Fi and the glyphosate, things like that, but or the mold, but we can better adapt. And that's why we want to clean up the cells. So calming down that cellular inflammation and boosting our cellular energy production, then you can start to flush out and grab on to those specific toxins and get them out of the body so that you can down-regulate that inflammatory response. For those that have dealt, you know, like myself, with mold illness, the technical term is called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, CIRS. So it's an immune system and an inflammatory response. Okay, a lot of research shows that even those, I work a lot with clients that have Lyme disease or other co-infections, it's really not about the bug. We always talk about, hey, you know, it's not about killing the bugs. It's about creating an environment in which the bugs don't want to hang out with. And then you get it to a certain level to where the immune system just is like, hey, I got this, because you better adapt. I can't avoid mold. I can go into a moldy hotel now and not end up on my back for a week, bloody noses, severe headaches, gut issues, the way that I used to. My genes haven't changed, but my genetic expression and my body's ability to look at that insult, that chemical assault that's happening because of the exposure, and say, hey, I can better regulate this. And it's all because I didn't just avoid mold, but I've gotten the mold that was trapped into my cells, in my tissues, out. But it was all these other pieces that allowed that process to happen at its most effective, you know, method.
And so it's not just mold. It's this process of the cellular inflammation and losing cellular energy and mitochondrial destruction, and all this can be. It could be, well, you talked about the pesticides and the man-made chemicals, mold, which exists in our homes, or a byproduct of, you know, leaky basements or unsafe schools or whatever it is. We've got heavy metals, which most of us get through the process of vaccination, but then they're just present in mom and you know,
and your teeth. So if you have amalgams in your mouth, your heavy metal burden is directly proportional to the amount of amalgams that mom had, and then what grandma had.
Right.
That's the issue.
And it takes generations to clean it out. And what I'm understanding, so all right, so our body's being bombarded every single day. And what happens is that we have the smallest part of who we are that we can see, which is the cell, and it's got these two membranes, right? And then inside the cell is all these cool things happening, and each of those have some membranes. And what you're saying is that, you know, God made us so that cool chemicals would attach to these things and great processes would happen. And instead, we're loaded and beat up with all these toxins that are instead binding to these receptors. And because they're not man-made, because they're not meant to be in our body is creating inflammation. And that inflammation, for our listeners dealing with the Pain Sucks podcast, reaches a threshold where then, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the body then tells you you have an issue, and that in the form of, in our case, in the form of pain, in the form of an uncomfortable symptomatology. And all along here you thought, I sprained my knee, and there might have been some physical level of spraining your knee, but this nasty chemical inflammation process that had been hiding itself from you underneath now exposes itself. And so what should have been a simple recovery process is now layered in a bunch of crap, if you will. And these are the folks that then need to wake up and recognize that this is not about doing some straight leg raise, to strengthen the knee, that below this needs to be something else addressed. And it's funny how many people have these physical injuries that come to me and you, and they're like, I don't understand though, because I've got this physical thing going on. Like, I definitely remember what happened. Mm-hmm. I lifted this thing and my back went out. Why am I not better? And also, why does my sleep suck? And why are my bathroom habits wrong? And why am I nauseous all the time? And where did these headaches come from? And why am I always shaky? And what are the chills about? And it's like, because that little moment where you thought it was just this tiny little thing exposed to you this cellular inflammation, this horrible cellular energy, and all these other life processes that are happening below. Correct?
Yeah.
Can I make it simpler, maybe?
Yeah. No. I mean, that's the thing is it's this cascade effect. Like, it's burning underneath, and then boom, that's it. And now you've created this loop, and your brain perceives that. And you go through all the emotions of, being ill or having an injury. And if we're not careful, we get locked down into that depressive mode, which only makes the pattern worse. So it's like your brain learns no matter what happens. It's like if a child touches a hot stove, they're probably not going to touch a hot stove again. Right. And these toxins and everything are just bombarding and screaming, and then boom, you have that final stressor. It is imprinted in your brain, which is why rewiring our thought pattern, rewiring the experience to make sure that, hey, it doesn't have to be this way, but that was a learning process. I love the fact that you brought up symptoms. I like to describe symptoms as these are welcome effects, not side effects, no matter what you're going through, because it's going to really help you know what's working. And it's not a matter of, hey, you got to feel worse before you feel better, but there is kind of a lot of healing. I always say that, sometimes the scab hurts worse than the original cut. Why? Yeah. Because it's healing. Okay. And there's a proper way. There's ways to help manage that to make it as comfortable as possible. But rarely do we see it like, hey, everything's good and I'm just getting better. The other thing is that I talked about order, and so do you when it comes to injuries and what you did. Like, yes, we need to restore motion, or like I would see so many patients come in, and I have an athletic training background. So a lot of rehab. So I really gravitate towards understanding more of the physical therapy side of things. But the problem is that we think that stretching, we think that strengthening is really, what's ultimately going to help that person recover. And we do need the mobility. But how many times have you seen that until we get proper alignment and we down-regulate that inflammation, that actually makes them worse?
Yeah.
They start to lose mobility over time because of the pain. Yep. And so we have to down-regulate the inflammation and get that, from a chiropractic standpoint, we want to make sure things are aligned properly so that you can then start to heal. Then you add that in. Once again, order matters.
And I love that you said that. And I've been preaching that since the day I sort of started to put the protocols together for disc herniations, because one of the things that frustrates me in the disc herniation world is and I love the chiropractic adjustment, but the chiropractic adjustment when someone has a sequestered or herniated disc like I did creates a massive amount of inflammation.
Yep.
And so
which is healing.
Yeah.
Right? It's healing. Right. It needs to be there.
Yeah.
But we need to get to the bigger issue.
Right.
A step before that.
Right. So we've got to go up one level and then up another level. And I want to go to the highest level, because I think, to me, the highest level is the one where I look people in the eye who are in a lot of pain. And number one, I never tell anyone it's going to be okay. I tell them at some point it will be okay. But like for right now, for the near future, it's going to suck. But part of that suck is because we're going to get you to a place where your future is amazing. And so, and you can handle it. But the truth is that people are hurting. So we got to go to this level of inflammation. So I want to go back to the cell, because I think it's very, very clear now in science that the inflammation process really is the basis of the diseases that we're going through. And that includes pain. And so when the body is in pain, pain is a perception of a chemical response. And so again, we're back to chemistry. So then is it an appropriate response? Is it not an appropriate response? Is it meant to be there for the moment, or is it something that your body is learning to live with over time? That's the difference between I just hurt something and it's been hurting for 30, 45 days. Now it's changed. But regardless, we know that there is no significant healing in life until that inflammatory process, or what you called the cellular inflammation, that like I always talk about, like the old oil commercials, like for engine motor oil, and they always show the competitors and it's all sludgy, and like that has to come out. That has to be released. Now, remember, it's still the inflammatory process from your injury, but now you're about to discover it's the cellular inflammation from your life. And so let's move into like, okay, so this makes sense. I put some ice on it, it got better, whatever. This is for the person who's like, what the frick is going on here? And like, so walk us through, what are we doing now about those cells? Like, give us that 5-minute quick rundown on like, what are we doing about those cells now to increase that cellular energy, get rid of that toxic load?
Yeah, so like it begins with the nutrients and getting those mitochondria what they really need. So those are things like selenium, minerals. Minerals are, and these are proper minerals, and all the products that are out there, you name it, are food. It's energy. And so this is why in the supplement world and the natural health world, it can be challenging, because not everything is equal. It could be pure, but it also has to be able to get inside the cell, which some of the things that we do are just, very unique in that. But to break it down very simply, we need selenium, we need minerals, we need iodine, and we need oxygen. Okay, so those are the 4 big things that are going to really boost that cellular energy.
Wait, repeat that again for the people. So we've got, so go ahead, those 4 things.
Selenium.
Yep.
Iodine.
Yep.
Minerals.
Yep.
Oxygen.
And you said, so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you said something really important, and I don't want to skip over it because I know it was huge for me and I missed it the first time years ago, was that you said this stuff is important, but probably more important is that we would get it into the cell. And what a lot of people don't get, like I would bet majority of the MLMs out there right now that people are throwing a whole bunch of money at, like, is that are you losing water weight and some extracellular crap, which is fine, but if we're not getting these things inside the cell where life happens, then it's just going to be a Band-Aid on something for a short period of time. Am I correct?
No, exactly. You are what you absorb. You are not what you eat or what you take.
Right.
Okay. So
right.
We, and I want to use a real quick example, these toxins, a lot of people are started to really understand, hormone disruption, thyroid conditions are epidemic. We can throw a whole bunch of hormone, natural or synthetic, inside that individual, and their blood work may look normal, right? But the problem is that I use the analogy, it's like shouting at your kids. So Dr. Matt, when you shout at your girls, how receptive are they? They're not. They
get turned off.
They tune you out. And so in this case, we want to get the proper nutrients inside. Then you have the ability to start to clean out the inside of the cell. Now you can start to bring things in naturally instead of just raising blood levels and making your blood work look pretty, but yet you still feel like crap. Why? Because it's not actually, so like that thyroid, for instance, that thyroid medication isn't getting inside the cell, or it's not, you know, getting properly converted to the active form, which that's what makes you feel good.
Right.
Okay. So we have to have certain products. So you can have amazing products out there even from a purity or a potency level, but certain, you know, you can, let's just say turmeric, right? It's huge in the inflammation world. Well, why does one product work better maybe than another, but yet on the label, it looks the same? It all comes down to energetics. And that's what's super important, of how to get it inside the cell and then let the cells start to detoxify the way that our bodies were designed. Now you can take the extra steps and go through an actual proper detoxification, cellular detoxification. You know, there's nothing wrong with cleanses. Like you mentioned, you know, outside the cell cleanses, they're good. 24-hour fast, intermittent fasting, certain things like that, that just naturally kind of help our bodies clean up themselves. But, and I really don't even like to use the word detox anymore, because I think it's been used and abused. We are talking on a whole nother level and a very complete process to be able to get this stuff out. And it's not a short-term process either. There's many concepts that should be really for the rest of our lives. It's the reason why I say detoxification has become more important than nutrition. Sad, but true. Okay. Those are the things that, you know, very simple nutrients that we can start to get inside the body to begin this process. And then that leads us right into, how many people do you know have gut issues?
Right.
Right. And so that's also our immune system. And so if we have this leaky gut, mainly because of glyphosate and what it does to the intestinal wall, parasites, other types of infections, well, now you can eat a food literally made by God that's supposed to be a health food, but now it's your poison, because you get this protein that goes right in your bloodstream, and boom, there's an immune inflammatory response that's happening. So now you're trying to do the right thing by eating the right healthy food, but yet you've got this double-edged sword thing going on, and we have to address that.
Real quick, because you moved on to gut from cell, and I know that they're the same, but in your opinion, in the people you deal with, does the gut need to be right before the cell can do its thing, or can the cell do its thing and then you go to the gut, or can you do them together?
Most of the things that I even talk about, there is no clear-cut definition of, you know, we talk about phases more from a learning aspect, but not from a process aspect. You're always working on draining out the organs, draining out the tissues, draining out the cells, making sure you're getting proper nutrients in. And we're always, you know, working on the gut in some aspect also, because like I said, we are a whole individual, right? And so nothing is broken out. You may be doing specific types of detox processes, you know, addressing specific things that then may stop for a period of time. But the basis, the foundation where the order matters, that's stuff that we want to elevate and make more efficient. And then our bodies normally do that themselves anyway. And so we wanted to make that more effective. But going back to the cell real quick, we talked about inside the cell. It also matters what's going on outside the cell. Okay, so we have that double layer of fat. So one of the other things that I really like, just from a healing standpoint, is fat therapy, lipids, omegas. People hear about omega-3 fatty acids. We need to have a balance. A lot of people, you know, the standard Americans are 20-to-1 ratio, omega-6 to 3. Like it's horrible, pro-inflammatory. So to heal the cell, we also have to heal that membrane. And we need fat. We need cholesterol. My sickest clients have extremely low cholesterol, which in the conventional medical world says, no, this is normal. Elderly patients, 50, 60, years old, they are driving cholesterol levels down toward 100 now. It used to be 200, 220, and they're literally cutting in half. And I have young clients that I've measured cholesterols of like 130, 140, and they're the sickest. And the brain's function, we need that cholesterol for healing too.
So you're saying of the 300 trillion cells that we have, we've got these membranes on the outside made up of fat. But what we have is a society that's trying to avoid fat. Because
exactly.
for some reason we were told that if you eat fat, it'll make you fat. If you eat fat, then you have a heart attack and da 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 da. When in fact, what we needed to be doing is consuming high levels of healthy fats so that those cell membranes, which are toxic and sluggish and disgusting from all the bad things we've put in, can now be healthy and strong so that they can be channels in and back out of the cell. And so what would you say to a person in chronic pain if like, that's really interesting. So someone in chronic pain comes and they're like, listen, what fats should I eat? And will it help me with my pain levels if I start eating healthy fats?
Yeah. So, things like coconut oil, avocado oil, good clean sources of olive oil, when it comes to cooking or even adding in grass-fed butter. A lot of people have heard about SCT oil. I use a product called, MCT oil, which the problem is that can be, not tolerated often, from a GI effect. We have some friends that they have a product, it's called SCT oil. Just go to sctoil.com. It's amazing. And by far it's something that I cook eggs in, I throw it in my coffee. So those that have heard, bulletproof coffee. My wife didn't tolerate MCT oil whatsoever because we discovered that she had some liver issues going on from toxicity like heavy metals and liver flukes. And so every time we tried to work on her gut and do some healthy fats, she didn't tolerate it, especially the MCT. And so that's where using something like a non-allergenic source of fat like the SCT oil, it was good for her. And so getting good food sources of fat. Yes, there's products and supplements. I really don't even, recommend things like a fish oil, krill oil, or we do have a few things that are more specific towards this more acute traumatic types of inflammation to really knock down some of those chemical compounds that are noxious, that are stimulating our system from an inflammatory standpoint. We want to, down-regulate that.
Right. That makes sense. So obviously MCT, we have coconut oil. People have just kind of followed this flow chart. Yeah. And then you've got MCT, which is medium chain triglycerides, which worked forever and still does for lots of people. But a couple friends of ours, like I said, SCT oil is short chain triglycerides, and we use it here as well. So, and Jesse uses it. And of course, when I was going through my back injury, Rob and Randy hadn't created that yet, and I wish they had, because one of the things that I recommend to herniation patients that I consult with all around the world is immediately begin intaking large amounts of healthy fat because of what you just said, because that toxic load just from the body trying to get inflammation out from the injury, we can begin that process of getting them back on track just from that. I mean, how many people have you got eating healthy fats and a week later I'm sleeping better, I feel better, and that's all you did because their body was just so overloaded from whatever happened.
Well, and sleep, that's the key. That's one of the first areas we work on focusing is like we got to get you sleeping better, faster, like than anything, just because that's when you're going to heal. And we know, for those that are suffering with chronic pain, we know how that affects our sleep. And then it cascades and compounds into so many other emotional and physical issues.
All right, so we could take the cell, we're healing the cell membranes, we're doing fat therapy, we're getting the extracellular around those membranes good, and then we get started on what are we doing on the inside? We got the selenium and the minerals and the iodine and oxygen, like you talked about, so on the inside. And then, so what do we expect to start to see happen in just a kind of a standard person?
Yeah, really, I always say, welcome anything. And literally anything is possible. Some people will feel better right away just because they're getting more energy. They'll be sleeping better. Maybe they'll be going to the bathroom better because the body is eliminating properly and getting, things moving better. Other people, they'll notice more, symptoms. It could be headaches. It could be, more joint achiness, more, fatigue types of feelings. Why is that? Because, now we're starting to mobilize. We're starting to get those toxins coming out, and the body is using massive amounts of energy, but yet you still have these toxins circulating, right? Which comes to my point of the next big key, which ultimately is the number one concept that probably saved my life, is we have to properly bind these toxins so that we don't redistribute throughout the body.
Okay, so And you know, you had just, that stimulated me to remember something, because so we've got our cell, we're handling the extracellular, we're handling the membranes, we're getting the inside, the body's beginning to dump the crap out, bring in good stuff. Where's it being dumped, by the way? Where does that crap end up? In the blood, in the gut, in the liver? Where does it go? Yeah,
I mean, it's, you know, our liver needs to process that. It's besides our skin, it's our largest detox organ. And it's estimated by 2025 that half of the population will have fatty, liver syndrome, non-alcoholic. So that's an issue. So we have to work on these specific organs at the same time. And when I mentioned drainage earlier, liver, gallbladder, like getting the system moving, our lymphatics moving. And that's the reason why people may notice symptoms when you start this process. It's really out of the fact that we're mobilizing, but they're stagnant. Their cells are most likely chronically dehydrated. So they don't have enough fluid to begin with. And then now we're starting to mobilize things and circulating more. So it can get redistributed into other organs. But how we get it out is through our urine, through our feces, and through our sweat. Okay. And that's the body's normal process. But a lot of times these toxins, especially like mold, it really likes to hit the bile duct, which then means you stop pooping. That's not a good thing. You want to, not having good bowel movements, build your toxicity really quick. That's a good way to do it. And then I feel like kidneys, for our urine production and the urea and where the toxins get dumped into a lot of times, which we're only talking like maybe 15%, if we don't properly bind these things and get it out of not only intracellular binding, but extracellular binding and letting our body now naturally process this stuff out. We have to get these pathways open before we ever start to say, hey, take this product. Let's just use, a lot of times people have probably heard like glutathione, our number one antioxidant that's produced in the body. Well, for many people, that's going to be a detriment early on, because that's going to stimulate the body to push out too much too fast before we've opened up those pathways, right? Some people will do better with it early on because it's going to help them clear and their pathways are just better. There's really not a way to truly ultimately know that besides good old trial and error. With guided expertise and just knowing in patterns and scenarios, which that's what I do, is to help navigate that. But that's a big issue, is that we start to actually take products or do certain things that are going to really dump out faster than our body can clear. And that's what we ultimately are trying to avoid, because that's where people crash.
Yeah. And so, all right, so let's go back to this order here. So we've established in chronic pain people that likely you have the cellular damage, you have cellular inflammation, cellular congestion, you've got the extra and the intra, and you want to begin to handle the membranes so that we can start to have this flow and transfer of good things. However, let me just quick yes or no. Can you bind things inside the cell without having the ability to like remove it from the body?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to bind those things and then we're going to draw them out into the body, at which point these things are so freaking smart. They're like, I don't want to leave. And so it's going to be us opening channels through our liver and our kidneys and our excretion organs, making sure that when those toxins come out of the cell, they're bound and then they get into the toilet, right? like they get into the toilet, like versus being reabsorbed and having. So, we've got the extracellular with our fats, we've got the intracellular with our selenium and iodine. And then of course, I know that everybody's different. And you can get tested for which those are. And then of course, work with you. And then, so what is it that we're doing to prep the liver, to prep the gallbladder, to prep the kidneys? What are we doing for this? So like on a very surface level, people laugh at me all the time with herniations and horrible pain. And so I'm like, so we got to start rocking some coffee enemas and things. Just things that
you read my mind, Dr. Matt. Everybody's got to love coffee enemas.
Yeah. And everybody laughs at me and says, I'll never do that. That's an outie hole. And like, I stay on them until they do it. And then I always get a text. And that text is, oh my God, I feel better than freaking ever. And it's because they're doing good getting this stuff prepared to leave the body. But the thing that gets it out of the body is so beat up that everything just goes back into the body. And that coffee enema, spend, you know, like maybe a minute, give us the minute version of what it is and what it does and why it's important for people in pain.
Yeah, so we talked about liver, we talked about the bile duct. So parasites, heavy metals, and mold really love to clog the bile duct. And then we have our gallbladder. So that's where we store the bile. Well, the bile is going to bind these fat soluble toxins. So even if you just, you know, you're just naturally eating and your body's going to produce and pump out the bile for digestion purposes and keep bowels moving, well, now that system's clogged, but you have these, you know, toxins that are attached in that bile. And the body has to use so much energy for digestion, which is why you don't go swimming after you've eaten for 30 minutes. Nobody ever explained that to me as a kid. And then I went, oh, I got it now. This is why, because your body uses so much energy to produce bile, it's not going to waste it. Therefore, it recycles it. So every time it recycles it, guess what you now get another hit of acutely into your bloodstream and into the rest of your system?
More toxins.
The toxins. Okay, so with coffee enemas, it's really gonna, the palmitic acid is really gonna help to let that bile down more. And that's the history of coffee enemas. They ran out of water in the war during surgeries. Hey, we got coffee, boom, coffee enema. They ran out of drugs for pain, coffee enema. That's how they discovered it. So there's history there. And as you said, my clients better be doing coffee enemas. There are definitely scenarios in which we don't do that, which I wanted to give another practical solution that can still help this exact same biliary, dumping process of bile and toxins is castor oil packs. So for somebody, let's just say I work with people that are dealing with like hemorrhoids, or there's maybe they've had some gastrointestinal type of surgery or whatever. I'm not going to have them do coffee enemas, but they can do castor oil packs, and that can really help this same exact process. We want to get lymphatics moving, because lymphatics get stagnated because you have a liver, gallbladder, bile duct issue. So now, think about downstream, everything is going to back up, behind the dam of the river. Well, back behind the dam of the river is our brain. So when our gut's off, this is why we get foggy brain. When our liver's toxic, we can't think, we have headaches, we have this pain. And that's why coffee enemas, castor oil packs can be really good solutions to get that going. But that's also going to help your lymphatics, plus just going for a walk, doing stretching, rebounding, jumping up and down. Very simple things that are very, very inexpensive and more or less free. The key is committing to it and being consistent with it.
Right.
Okay. We can get into products and herbs and things like that support these, but we still always build in lifestyle approaches, because I don't want somebody to have to supplement themselves to death, but we do need to use tools. So we combine all of those approaches.
That makes sense. And so, like, one of the things I can remember, the very first coffee, and I wrote about it in my book that's coming out here pretty soon. I wrote an entire area on how not to do it, because this is what I did. Everything from dumping it on myself to not cooling it off and burning my insides to, and because nobody told me, right? I reached out to a mentor and a friend of ours, and I'm like, do you think this will help? I can't sleep. I'm miserable. And he said, yes. And I've been taking Norco because the pain, and I was bound. So I did it wrong. But in the book, I also wrote about how to do it right. But you explained it. There's that chemical in that coffee that is actually absorbed straight through the large intestine right into the bloodstream. So as it passes through the liver, it affects this gallbladder process, so that the gallbladder and the liver now are dumping back to the gut, and then you're just removing. So along with everything that's coming out that was in your intestines, which for most of us is disgusting, are all those toxins that you just finished pulling out of the cell, because you were doing the right things to heal the inside of the cell, and you did the right things to create the extracellular membranes to allow this stuff to come out. And so the coffee enema is a big one. And then I like how you talk about lymphatics. Like, too many people in pain don't realize like right now movement is everything. Like, you stay moving and you'll win. And we're not talking about getting to the gym again. Like, no. I tell people who are like, I can't get out of bed. If you can get out of bed and just walk, or like, if you can't get out of bed, like, pump your knees, pump your arms, raise your hands above your head. Like, take advantage of the fact that God made systems that are going to keep things cleansing and moving. And so I love that you went there. So I want to, as we wrap up here, a couple things, like I just want to, so if someone's listening and they don't really have access to a lot of stuff, they've been in pain for a long time, this is making sense to them. Number one, what are the tests that people would want to run to find out where they stand? And then number two, give me like 5 simple things that people in chronic pain can begin to do in their home right now today to begin this process of moving forward. Yeah, so let's talk about some of the solutions, kind of to piggyback on what we were just talking about, is things that are very low cost or free. I think we really, did a good job talking about the coffee enema and the liver. But, before we came on, you talked about, hey, just like getting some lemon water in, right? That's going to really help the kidneys. I feel like the kidneys are probably one of the most underappreciated, underaddressed issues. So that's something very simple. First thing in the morning, get some lemon water in. Another thing, salt. Good, clean Himalayan sea salt. Things like Redmond, that brand is another good one. Salt is your friend. And this kind of gets into that talk of the minerals. This is why it will help you feel better, because our sodium and potassium create this natural chemical pump to pump bad things out, good things in. And that's why salt is your friend, despite what the mainstream message is, like the low fat, they say no salt. Well, you want to get sick, don't consume this stuff, right? One of the other things is I think, Scott, real fast, how much sea salt, like a tablespoon a day? Yeah, I would say start with a tablespoon. There's some other methods to go higher, more therapeutic, like really intentfully getting that in, but start with just a tablespoon. Just the basics, right? Yeah, okay. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Another thing that I really, really stress to my clients is the faster that we start to get into our mind and really understand that everything is based on our perceptions. You could have had the exact same thing happen to you as somebody else, and their reaction to that and their experience in that can be completely opposite because you guys perceived it. So I always use like, hey, some people love roller coasters and other people are scared to death. It's the same ride, it's the same thing, but they experience something differently in their mind. So I always refer to, I always have clients read the book Wired for Healing from Annie Hopper. It's getting into what's called the Dynamic Neural Response System, DNRS, because that sets the foundation. And for $20, you can get a book that I just worked with a client yesterday who's gone through major traumas in her life, marital issues, living in moldy homes and having to move and all the costs. And she's like, it's been amazing how much better my body feels, the energy I have, and the pain that I don't have anymore, because she had a breakthrough, which was, I got to address between my ears, and you can rewire the brain. So that's another thing that I would be practicing on the daily with guidance. And that's why I like that book. It really helps you understand the limbic system, the role that the brain plays in no matter what you're dealing with. These are the things that I think we should all be taught much earlier on before there is a crisis, because our emotions are powerful. Yeah, we've actually did, I think 3 of the first maybe 6 of these podcasts were all about that. You know what I mean? It was super interesting because I was like, I could tell people to do all this stuff, but if they don't understand the mentality and the emotion behind what just happened, or what they're about to find out, then it's a rough ride. So I agree with that. So here's what I got: healthy fats, lemon water, Himalayan sea salt, Wired for Healing. We talked about coffee enemas, which people can just Google how to do that, or reach out to me and what are you, or we'll tell them. Yeah. Give me one more thing, man. Give me an exercise thing here, brother. Give me something that people got to be doing. Yeah, honestly, stretching. Like, because we have definitely people that can't. I have a lot of bedridden type of individuals that it's like, hey, you can even sit in bed and do some light stretching just to get things moving. But if you are at the point where, hey, I can do some things, this is where it's like
short duration, you know, low, moderate intensity to begin and keep working up, but don't go too long. Like a lot of us are suffering from this energy issue. So I've always said like these 45-minute workouts, I'm like, why? We can do something in 5 minutes and have way better outcome to not create. Cause that was, and I didn't talk about this, but that was the number one thing that bothered me growing up is I was super active, played every sport, but my recovery sucked. And I would get this chronic pain set in and the muscles, I would get super tight, and no matter what I did, it was a chemical issue. And then probably even now because of a chemical issue, now I have cellular dehydration. And so, so really working on the water and all the things you mentioned. And then probably the number one last piece would be is really, really commit to a bedtime routine to work on sleep. So get your movement. And then I like to stretch before bed, because right at that later hour, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, this is why we don't want to eat maybe first thing in the morning. I throw it in there every once in a while to break that fast earlier with a bigger feast. But we need our bodies to rest and heal. And overnight, that's when our liver is doing all that work from the day. So that's how you can, pair coffee enema, stretching, bedtime routine. That's going to really focus on being able to let the body flush those out and start getting better sleep, which ultimately you heal better.
I love it. It's funny that you mentioned that too, because I was listening to some podcasts recently where a lot of experts were talking about why stretching before exercise is kind of a waste.
Yeah.
And do after. And then also that now science is saying the best time of day to stretch is before bed.
Yeah. Because you're going to mobilize things naturally, right? And then now your body can process it. So once again, it comes down to order. All the right things, but when we get that order mixed up, this is where it can, maybe not be as effective, or for some people, it can be more detrimental.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. All right, man. So listen, we've gone a little over an hour. Let's end with this. So where can someone find you that says, I need some coaching, some counseling, and then, walk us through a little bit how that looks. So give us where we can get you all over the web, whatever, and then tell us how it works working with you.
Yeah. So simply just go to thrivehealthcenters.com. Right there, you can reach out, email me directly, just hit the contact us button. If you are like, hey, like this is awesome, I don't know which direction I need to go, I really want to deeper dive into this, right down on that very home page, you can click the button. It's going to ask you some simple questions, and right then and there, you can book a free discovery call with me. Let's have a conversation. Every situation's different. We usually spend about half hour going through like, hey, what have you been going through? What have you done up to this point? Here's some of the pieces that we really want to discover more in depth, and then that leads into doing a full consultation. So just like this, I do video conferencing with clients all over the world, deeper diving into their history. We ask them toxicity questions. Going back, you would ask, hey, what's some testing? Simple toxicity tests. Go out and look up VCS testing. You can do it online for free through your computer. It's going to ask, it's going to talk about the fact of how it affects what's called contrast sensitivity. And that's a simple online test. I do other, non-expensive types of testing to really dig into, these toxins, looking at heavy metals, or you mentioned even nutrients inside your blood, that type of thing. Those are the things that we get into. And during that full consultation that we go through is I'm looking for the underlying other triggers, other exposures, by asking a lot of, extensive questions so that we can really identify, okay, hey, yeah, this really isn't like a mold exposure. This really, hey, I live by a cell phone tower. Is that affecting me? Right? Because that a lot of people will be very sensitive, and it's not really so much, hey, it's the Wi-Fi, the radiation, which is a big issue. But now if you have heavy metal toxicity that's really high, it's going to amplify that, right? So we want to look at all that. And during that consultation, it's formulating the game plan, really helping you to deeper look into potential blind spots, what other type of labs. I'm very conservative with labs because questions are our number one tool. And through experience, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, it is a duck, right? So it's kind of like, hey, if it looks like mold, smells like mold, it is mold. Like I've seen it. I've worked with 1,000 people doing this. So that's what we're going to do during that full entire consultation, and that really helps us to determine what does it look like, on what level, how do we work? Is it, hey, I just need some guidance. I can consume this stuff and really work on it. Just give me the sources, give me, so that I'm not making missteps. Like you said, it's like, hey, I didn't have this. I didn't know this when I was going through. I had so many things that I just didn't know. And this whole process of doing this is to save people a ton of time and money ultimately, because we've been there and we've pulled all of these pieces. And then, like I said, the other aspect is hey, like I really, really need to help and I want to work, very exclusive and intimately on this. Then we do have one-on-one types of programs where I, go through everything, custom protocols, all lifestyle. We talk about emotional coaching. We address it everything. I don't know what's come up 3 months from now, but whatever it is, we're here to help you in any way we possibly can. So there's a couple avenues in which we determine what's going to be the best fit, for somebody to really get the answers and solutions and ultimately recover.
I love it. And I know that over time, I've had you work with some of our people where my knowledge is limited and they had great success. And so I would encourage people, just check out Thrive Health Centers. There's a lot of good stuff there. And I'm sure that Scott would be happy to, for any of the listeners, to just return a couple of emails, ask some questions. Exactly. He's a very approachable guy. And Scott, I just want to appreciate you, man. We learned a lot. I got some notes. I'll type them up. They'll be in the show notes today, resources, things you talked about. I hope people reach out to you. And so thanks for being here, man.
Hey, thanks. I'm so blessed for the opportunity and just love and appreciate you, man.
Awesome, man. So guys, this was the Pain Sucks podcast. And remember that no one, absolutely no one, gets to tell you that you can't heal. We love you. Be safe. Be healthy. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.